We will wait, Trina, we will wait a few minutes as we get more people in. We tend to see people kind of slowly come into these. Well, we will get started. We tend to have only a few attendees, but we end up recording these and they get a lot of playback. So we'll welcome folks that are both here with us live and also folks that end up viewing this recording later. So I am Jack Miner. I am the director of the SEM Conference, but I'm also vice provost at University of Cincinnati. So I will give the other panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. Lee, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Lee Fairbeck, and I'm the Vice President for Enrollment Management at Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches, Texas.
Hello, my name is Jenny Katowski. I'm the Director of Admissions at Kellogg Community College, which is located in Battle Creek, Michigan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel Saud. I'm the Director of International Admissions at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington.
Wonderful. And to start with, could each of you tell us a little bit about your institution, about what your institution's enrollment goals are, where you are in enrollment planning? Do you have an enrollment plan, and what are you trying to accomplish?
We're kind of in the beginning stages of ours, so I will go first. First of all, just to let folks know, I'm pretty new to this role. I arrived here in Texas at this institution in February, so not quite a year yet. I came across a situation where we have an interim president. So we are awaiting a new president, and that means that a lot of things are waiting. But one thing is not waiting, and that's our strategic enrollment planning process. So one of the things that I did after I kind of got the lay of the land is kick off a process which, if you think about strategic enrollment planning, typically that would be done with the university's strategic plan and those goals in mind. Well, we are waiting on a new strategic plan for our new president. Ours actually expires this year. So we're moving forward with a set of assumptions regarding enrollment. Enrollment was a big part of that plan to begin with, and we can't afford to wait. So we're moving forward. We've launched a university-wide effort. We have been informed by some of ACRO's recent publications, actually, about the SEM maintenance and strategic planning process in general. And we have our 4 councils set up: recruitment, retention, academic programs and deliveries, and then a marketing communications council and a data council. As far as our enrollment goals, we are in the process of doing some research to try to put some actual numbers to those. Our numbers in the current strategic plan aren't really valid because that was written pre-COVID and it was not revised. So we are moving forward with the goal of increasing or making more positive our metrics in the areas of recruitment, retention, and then with some specific target populations. So that's where we are, just kicking it off here at Stephen F. Austin.
Daniel.
So, it's interesting because WSU is in a process of what we call systemizing our system, right? We are one of the few small land-grant university system where we have multiple campuses, but our faculty and the university is accredited throughout all our campuses, right? So a big part of our plan, the strategic plan for the system, has been driven by the strategic enrollment plan, right? Which is to stabilize our undergraduate student enrollment, as well as grow new student enrollment. enrollment. And for us, being in Pacific Northwest, it actually means, how do we make sure that folks who ordinarily would not find a home in Eastern Washington are actually seeing that as an option as far as our colleagues in domestic undergraduate admissions are concerned. And then for international students within International Programs Division at WSU System, the goal really has been, how do we reach out to places and countries which ordinarily we have not always engaged in, right? I think many of the institutions across the country have always pre-pandemic depended on China and India as their source country for undergraduate enrollment. And what we're learning from that is you cannot always put all your eggs in one basket, right? You need to diversify as part of your enrollment strategy where your international students are coming from, and then really making sure, because cost is such an important subject for international and domestic student, how are you appraising their undergraduate curriculum so that your institution could be, and for us, WSU could be a choice destination for our international students.
Jenny.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. So Kellogg Community College is a 2-year institution. We offer associate degrees, technical certificates, and short-term certificates. So we are open admission. And so that brings a whole new challenge. We have seen 10 years worth of decline in our enrollment. And so we really knew in order to stay viable, we needed to make some changes related to our we're looking at it in 3 buckets of our recruitment and enrollment, our retention, and our graduation success. And then helping students either move on to a 4-year institution or entering the workforce. So we actually partnered with Interact Communication to help write our SEM Plan, which was approved by our Board of Trustees in May of 2023. It took us about 9 months to write the whole plan and get that going. We've already seen some successes. We had an 11% increase in enrollment this fall semester, which was pretty darn exciting. They just kept coming, and that was a high-class problem to have. So now we really looked at our SEM Plan from a 1-year lens to think about how we would initially launch that. And now we are starting to think about the second phase of that. So we've just brought on 3 new initiatives as we've completed some initiatives. And we're really taking the approach that our SEM Plan is a living, breathing document. And instead of trying to do something with 3 to 5 years, we're trying to do it 1 year at a time, knowing that some of the changes we implement are going to make some of the things that may have gone on the plan not needed anymore. So that's really our approach to this enrollment pipeline, and trying to look strategically at our enrollment process, the steps to enrollment, where our students having the biggest barriers to that. We were able to remove one of the big barriers there. And now we're moving more into our retention side, and what are we doing to keep and retain our students? And then, like I mentioned, we've graduation and helping students move on to university or whatever their next goal is. We've just signed some new articulation agreements with some local institutions. That has really helped us to be able to market of start here and finish there, and be able to talk to the student about the value of a Kellogg education and how that can adapt to the university the student might want to go to. So those are really the things that we've been working on, our enrollment goals, and kind of the implementation of our SEM Plan.
Great, well, thanks. And so just to put it into context from my standpoint, so very similarly, a lot of challenges through COVID. We've actually been growing over the last few years about 7 to 10% a year for our first year class, as well as our non-traditional students, including during COVID. Fall 22 to fall 23, we grew by 3,000 students overall. So our current enrollment is at 51,000 now, with the goal of being 60,000 by 2030. Interestingly enough, we do not have a SEM plan. We are very much there's a long backstory to that. There's not a culture here to have a SEM plan or a strategic plan. So very, get to 60,000. Our SEM plan is, Jack, get us to 60,000 students is the entire depth of our SEM plan. So again, I am always particularly interested in hearing from other schools of what their challenges are, because I feel like it's really helpful to us. So you talked about where you're going, what some of your goals are. Talk about over the last few years, what have some of your successes been? What have some of your challenges been from an enrollment standpoint over the last kind of 2 to 4 years?
I'm happy to go first on this one. I think some of our challenges is assumptions that were made for typically community college enrollment goes up when we're in a recession. And so there was a lot of thought that COVID and unemployment rates were high, so the students were going to flock to us to take school. And that just did not happen across the country. And we were no different for that. And I think now that the pandemic is really, yes, we're having spikes and it's going to always be a part of our lives. I think the settledness of where we've been over the last 6 to 8 months, we've seen an uptick in older non-traditional students returning back to get their education, wanting to do it for their kids, feeling like they had missed out on that during COVID. So that has really been one area. Was a challenge because we lost them during the pandemic, but now they're starting to come back. And so that's an opportunity of growth for us. I think our other big shift is a lot of our faculty still see teaching as in the classroom teaching, but the students are asking for online learning. And so we're really having to work hard to manage our schedule for what faculty want to teach and when they want to teach versus what the demand is from our students and what classes are filling up and what they are asking for more of. So that's something we've really been working on, especially in the fall, as we had a higher enrollment than we were anticipating, as we were starting to manage that and add more classes. What were the classes that the students were asking for versus what maybe our instructors wanted to teach? So that's what we've been working on and kind of dealing with right now.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Thanks. It's interesting, Jack, because I think years ago, I remember having a conversation. I was interviewing the president of Wilson College, and she said, you know, the biggest challenge that we tuition-driven institutions need to figure out is how to help a college student understand the proposition of the college degree. And the equation of the degree value and the cost is so out of balance that we need to bring it back to equilibrium. And I think for us, that's been the case consistently, right? As a land-grant institution that's post-COVID, students that ordinarily just went to college because that's the thing you do, genuinely started questioning the value of degree on the domestic side. On the international side, we started seeing that amongst more populous countries, students wanted more of a college credits while they were in school, right? They wanted to make sure that when they were entering college, they already had 24, 30 credits, either because they had taken community college coursework or they had taken advanced credits through various curriculums like Cambridge, or more, or in the event that they didn't have that, I think the other challenge we saw was that institutions that were data poor because they didn't collect as much specific data on outcomes, students wanted to know what were truly the outcomes and still are, right? How many folks are getting jobs, what kind of salaries. And so that in itself, for us as a challenge, manifested in realizing we really need to make sure that our systems, the admissions management system, the CRM, your file, is communicating with our registrar office, with our international synapses system. So we're able to see a linear model, if you will, in the mind of a student to share this is what the outcome looked like. And that was the biggest challenge that for us in international education that we faced, right? That we weren't used to tracking our international student outcomes like we did for our domestic students. And so when a student in a foreign country said, well, what do you do after a job? Because there's a good chance I may not get a job in the United States, I have to come back. What are those outcomes? We had to track that piece. And that was something that we were being held accountable for, which pre-COVID didn't really exist at that level. Just primarily, I think, because the cost is so much, right? For both the domestic and an international student, the cost of American higher education, the degree value is still out of balance.
Yeah, I would echo everything that you just said, and I saw Jenny nodding as well. I think that really that emphasis on the value of a higher education and why should I go to college and how is that going to pay off for me is important to all of our students at all levels, whether that's graduate or undergraduate, domestic or international. So much so that one of the first things that that we implemented when I came here is a focus in our communications on value. And I totally hear what you're saying about some of the data that I wish I had to be able to present a more complete story about outcomes to our students. So we are working on getting that, and we'll get there. But for now, again, total agreement and a focus on that area. I neglected to mention previously what size we are. So we were, until September 1st, an independent institution, one of two in the state of Texas that does not belong to a system, Publix. And we joined the University of Texas system on September 1st. So in talking about how that informs our strategic plan, that came with a whole new set of opportunities, as well as I don't want to say restrictions, but a system has its own policies and its own goals and its own way of doing things and managing things. And you can't operate as an independent any longer, as we have been. So that's certainly taken some getting used to. And we are very happy to be part of the system, but it's not without its challenges, but also, again, some incredible opportunities, particularly when it comes to enrollment. And resources. So I've already talked a little bit about the lack of an overall strategic plan and how that is in some ways detrimental to having to craft a strategic enrollment plan and undergo that process without knowing what the overall strategic plan is. Because one of the assumptions that I made is that we want to continue to grow, and that's something that the system wants us to do up to a certain point. We're at about 11,000 now, and we have more capacity than that. I think we would like to increase at least to fill our physical capacity here on campus. We are a regional institution in East Texas, and we are largely residential as well. So we're one of those regional residential schools that you hear about in the higher ed media sometimes. Which is full of, again, its own opportunities, but also challenges. I think I found, since I haven't been a Texan for very long, that the landscape here in higher education is a little bit different than other places that I've worked. I've worked in several states, mostly across the upper Midwest. But, certainly when you look at the competition, we're one of the few states that actually has a healthy high school senior population and graduation rate. But those students are not in East Texas. They're in other parts of Texas. And as I learned very quickly, Texas is pretty large. We have people that fly to in-state conferences because it is a prohibitive distance for driving. And we're over on the edge, like right next to Louisiana. I will say that the competition is stiff. We have recruiters that are in the Houston area, and the Dallas area, and the Austin area, San Antonio area. There are recruiters from all 50 states and beyond in all of those areas. So the competition is quite stiff. The other thing that I will say, and I don't want to say too much about it, is that if you've been keeping up with the news, which I'm sure that you guys have, there's been some interesting legislation in the state of Texas and some interesting polls that have come out. And that's a challenge as well, kind of working through some of that. I would also say that we have, if you look at our programs, we need additional capacity in some of our newer programs that are high growth programs. We need to scale up some of our retention programs that are successful. We need to be able to point our resources in the right direction instead of having, somebody with a great idea and a one-off over here and somebody with a great idea and a one-off over here. We need to get people together who are working on the same same types of initiatives. And that way we can just resource more efficiently. We can prioritize so that we're resourcing initiatives that are going to have the biggest impact on enrollment, since that's the direction that we're heading. I will also say, just as a side note, that it has been certainly, maybe not in terms of the planning process, but when it comes time to implement the plan, and then just, in our day-to-day actions, we're facing some pretty significant staffing challenges too. I know that you guys have been reading about this is an issue for financial aid. It's also an issue for admissions, registrar. And we need to find a way to solve that problem so that we can put these great plans that we're going to put into place into action.
I wanted to go back to Daniel's comment about the value and how much that is really become prevalent. I feel that there's been a shift in students that see college as a commodity. And so I'm going to pay you this money and you're going to give me my education, and helping them, the link between the work that is involved getting there, that will then help add to the value of the education that you're getting. And that's where I think some of the struggle after COVID, that people have really, rightly so, taken ownership of their personal life and the importance of balance in our life. So sometimes adding one more thing like education can be a lot for students. The traditional age student may be helping at home with their family with a part-time job and helping with their siblings. With my population, the older population that tend to have family and they're taking care of grandparents and parents and kids. So I think that's one of the things that higher education needs to make a shift on, is representing this value, but also helping students understand that they do have to do a little bit of work in this as well, that all those transferable skills you're gaining have to come. It's not just taking the 3 business classes and having the business degree. It's that critical thinking that comes in so important that helps you get hired.
And I think, Jenny, that's very important, because I think in today's time, right, while we have a Gen Z that someone was sharing with me that, they were polled and they're 55% more likely to walk into a library than all the other generations. That's great. Yet at the same time, this the same generation that has many models in front of them that say, if your goal is just to be economically stable and make a salary as a coder, you can do that without having to, right? And to help them understand that piece is such a challenge, right? And I think then, to your point, when they see that as a commodity, and then when they're receiving these signals around the globe, that what really matters is truly the financial depth of your pocket, then they are questioning the point of college education, right? It's very interesting, because I think we see that quite often, that the idea of seeing a college degree and then serving, whether it's your own country or not, and largely affected by, as Lee was saying, we don't have across the country the degree programs that have the demand, whether it's nursing, whether it's physical therapy. We haven't increased the capacity to a level where you have a direct, right, outcome that is there. That makes it such a challenge.
Lee mentioned the politics, and I know that one of the things that we're seeing, for example, that kind of fits in with this is a state institution. One of the things that we're frequently faced with is not only is it the students that need to be convinced of what is the value of a college education, but a lot of times our legislators have lost direction on what the value of a degree is. So talk about kind of that. How does that larger political climate that we're in right now impact you when it comes to your enrollment plan and your enrollment strategies? And then similarly, we've talked about COVID. How has COVID impacted you as well? So kind of that point in time where we are now, that are not just the normal enrollment struggles, but with what we're facing today, what are you seeing as those challenges, or the things that you're addressing in a way that you may not have thought to or needed to address in the past? I'll jump in and give a,
If somebody else wants to go
I was
first.
gonna say, I'll get the ball rolling. So one for me that is an absolute post-COVID realization for us is our enrollment growth has largely been on underrepresented students. So really significant numbers of first generation, inner city, et cetera. One of the things that's ended up impacting us in a way that we would not have faced 5 or 10 years ago is we're seeing a very, very specific impact from when individual students went back into in-person high school. So if you received your junior and senior year of high school online, you did not absorb math and science as well as the students who received math and science in person in the building. And so that's, I think, universal. MIT and some other schools have also kind of recognized that that's an issue for their students, that they are not seeing the same strength in math and science that they would have seen pre-COVID. But for us, one of the things that we're starting to see is all the societal factors that figure into that. So one of the things that I talk about frequently is we can specifically look at whether or not a Catholic school, a private school, or a charter school went back to in-person instruction a month to 6 months faster than an inner city school went back to in-person instruction, and all the politics and dynamics that go along with that, and how that absolutely is impacting whether or not those students are successful their freshman and beginning of their sophomore year based on how well they did or didn't do at math. So for us, that's been a really important conversation about how we address student supports. That's been a really strong conversation about how do we look at retention rates, but also in trying to convince faculty and how do you change the pedagogy around some really specific courses and doing more early assessment. So we're learning things because the students don't look the same as they did in 2019.
We, I think, have seen, and I know this has always been something, but we talked about value earlier, but this idea that students do not want college debt. And so this, how much do you cost? How many scholarships? How many loans? I don't want to leave college with debt. Our state here in Michigan, our governor is very much about education. She has started several grant programs. One is called the Michigan Reconnect, and it is for students who are 25 or older who have not earned a college degree, an associate's or higher, and have lived in Michigan for the last year. It becomes the messaging of those grants and programs. So it says free, but it's in-district tuition and fees, not online fees. It does not pay for books. So then helping students to understand that has become part of our plan. This is a great way to bring back some non-traditional students, but the program doesn't actually do what the marketing is saying that it's doing. And then there's also a lot of reporting that has to go with it. So we had a nice influx of students utilizing Michigan Reconnect, but it's putting additional burdens onto our financial aid staff, who now have to make sure that students are in program with all of their classes several times a semester. So some of those, like the state is trying to help, but when you're not in education to make those decisions, not understanding the consequences of those actions. So that's one of our big things our legislature has done. They're really trying to help the community colleges and help students get their education starting here. We've had a huge influx in nursing students as a result of that. But again, it becomes capacity in our nursing programs and then helping students navigate the process. They're also required to fill out the FAFSA in order to get the Michigan Reconnect. And we all know the FAFSA has been delayed until sometime in December. So that is also a difficult thing for students to be wanting to understand as they are making college decisions. How much aid am I going to get? What scholarships am I going to get when we are back to this model of not being able to package you until probably February or March? So it adds some complexity that way when you get into politics and the government being involved.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just for the record, I'm really jealous that Jack has on his campus the resources to be able to study something as granular as when the high schools resumed in-person classes. Certainly we've seen a difference in preparedness levels from some of our students who are showing up as first-year students, and we've made some accommodations for that in the form of some hybrid type classes to kind of help them get caught up to what our class may have been in the past. And we just don't have the research to go that granular. So very jealous. Speaking of, things that the legislature has done, and I actually came most recently from Michigan, so I'm familiar with the program that you're talking about, Jenny. But we have had legislated a program that went into effect this fall, and it centers around our students who are dual credit students or dual enrolled students. So I know that's defined differently in different places. So just to be clear, we're talking about students who are in high school, who are taking college level courses for both high school and college credit. And basically, students who fall into a specific socioeconomic band, the state is going to pay for them to take those dual credit classes. Now, I'm aware from working in other states that sometimes this state was already covering that for absolutely everybody, but that has not been the case in Texas. But I will say this program is not without its challenges because it was legislated and put into effect so quickly. Some of the back end pieces just aren't quite into place yet. And so, for example, any 2 or 4 year schools who are participating for this fall are not going to know which students are or are not actually required to pay for the course until sometime in November. You can imagine all the challenges that creates for everyone involved, from student business services, financial aid, all the way through. Well, not financial aid, but others across the university. So that's an example. I mean, it's a wonderful program, and it was put into place and very quickly. And I think that next year, we're going to be able to reap the benefits even more so. It's just been a little bit of a challenge to get that implemented for the institutions that chose to implement this year. I'm going to speak on the COVID, a couple of topics that we haven't really talked about, but they kind of stem from the question of what are we seeing as a fallout from COVID. And I'm going to point to a couple of things. First of all, there are a lot of people across the institution, and that's not just the case here, who seem to think that, okay, now we're done with COVID, so why isn't our enrollment right back exactly where it was pre-COVID? Well, I have been doing a lot of explaining about what it's going to take to get us back there, if that's where we want to go with that mix and that number, and how long that's going to take. Because what we're seeing right now, as you guys and probably most of the people viewing this webinar know, is that we've got, at least here, we have more students coming in. We had a 10% increase in our first year class for this fall, which is great and exactly where we want to be. But we also have been graduating larger numbers of students. So we've got students on the front end, on the graduation end, who are leaving in larger numbers, and that's fantastic because we want them to graduate. We've had our largest graduation ceremonies and numbers of graduating students that we've ever had at this institution, which is phenomenal. But we've got more going out than we have coming in, even though we have an increase in the number coming in, because we have those smaller classes that are still in the mix. And people think, oh, we're this many years past COVID, so that should have played itself out by now. But that's just not how it is in reality. So I don't know about you guys, but I've been explaining that a lot. The other point that I'm going to make really quick, and then I'll let someone else speak, is that we are a school with a very large College of Education and Human Services. And post-COVID, there is a lot less interest in education at the undergraduate and the graduate level. So if you're a school like us that had large populations of students in well-known programs in those areas, that's a challenge in and of itself, because not only do you have to compete against all of the other folks that have a wonderful College of Education in those same programs, you have to explain to students and their supporters why they might want to go into the education field in the first place. And yes, there are jobs in that area, but there's not the interest that there used to be.
Lee, it's interesting you say that, because yes, that's something we have even witnessed, right, in our College of Education as well. And just a couple of things, Jack, your comment made me realize I say this, I think, at least twice a week. It feels like everyone thinks deadlines are negotiable post-COVID, especially our students. And we never, in the context of international students, we never used to see this where, the student arrival date orientation starts on August 20th, and you have students asking if they can arrive on September 2nd. Like, that just was not a thing. I mean, maybe you would see late arrival till like well into the first week. And I think what COVID has done is perhaps provided that or reinforced that mindset that education is a commodity. And so now we can renegotiate our start date. And if that doesn't work, there may be someone else who is able to take me on. So that's been a big challenge. And I think, to your point, one of the things we have also witnessed in the context of our international student persistence is they were always, before, international students were a little bit wary of speaking up in class, right? They tend to be a little bit shy about that. But now we see that there's just no engagement with our academic support services when they're struggling, right? And so you see this ghosting model, and by the time you get to helping them, no matter how much interventions you do, intrusive advising you do, it's too late, and they're having to repeat that cycle. So we've seen more of that. But I think the other piece that, speaking of the politics that we've had to navigate, is that, for a lot of institutions dependent on two of the most populous countries in the world for their undergraduate enrollment. And I mean, we have just seen some abysmal enrollment from China. And it's really hard, given the stringent budgets that we all have at public institutions and at private, to justify a $2,000 coach class ticket for recruitment to China. Right. And that's going to affect us when you think about our global politics significantly. It's going to affect us also as far as our global politics is concerned when we think about the way we are trying to engage in Africa as part of the current administration's initiatives, and us as U.S. institution not being cost effective in a lot of those areas, because the cost, when you compare the value proposition of our institutions to our Canadian counterparts or Australian or British, is not the same. And that politics, along with the war in Ukraine, has had a significant impact on student persistence, right? Because what do you do when a student, whether it's your student athlete or a student whose family used to do business with Russia, even though they are Swedish, their assets, they can't access their funds, or a Ukrainian student who is stressed out, or a Myanmar student that's stressed out because they can't get in touch with family. And those aspects of global politics have had micro effects on, I think, a lot of our campuses, including ours.
So switching gears a little bit, one of the things that each of you are doing is a session at the SEM Conference specifically on some aspect of an enrollment plan and strategic enrollment plan. So talk a little bit about what your session is. What are the things that we should come and expect to learn from you or hear more from you when we're in Seattle next month? Lee, I'll make you go first.
Okay, I'll go first. So my session is on Tuesday at 9 a.m. and it's called No Plan, No Problem, Creating a Strategic Recruitment and Enrollment Plan That Works. And this is going to be a session that I think is going to have a lot of great takeaways. The reason that I wanted to present on this topic is because I have numerous times walked into a new institution, into a new role, asked where the recruitment plan is, asked sometimes where the strategic enrollment plan is, existed. And Jack, kind of like you were saying at your institution, what I was charged with is more. We don't care who the more is, we just want more. Or at one institution, it was a seemingly arbitrary number that would be a milestone for new first-year students, based on nothing, as far as I could tell. So one of the things that I'd like to talk about is what do you do if you step into a situation like that? How do you manage expectations? One of the things that I found is even if there's no plan, there's a plan, or at least there's assumptions about the direction that the university is to be heading. I've never walked into a situation in my career, and I know others probably have, where they have said, you know, we don't care about revenue, we just want more students. Or, well, actually, sometimes they haven't been thinking of revenue specifically, but once I threw that out there, they made it clear that we didn't want to just open our doors for free to everyone. I don't think that you can assume necessarily that that there's not some sort of assumption as far as, do you want to grow, where you can look at where the resources are being put. So anyway, those are some things I'm going to talk about in the session. I'm going to talk about mission alignment. I'm going to talk about specific strategies. I'm going to talk about what KPIs to look at, talk a little bit about the market analysis that needs to go into a recruitment plan, and then in the context of the strategic enrollment plan, going to talk nitty gritty, assignable tactics. Without knowing who's responsible for what and exactly what you're doing, you're probably not going to get anywhere except collecting dust on a shelf, which is what we don't want to do. Evaluating the plan, and I'm also going to supply some templates so that anyone who's trying to either create a new recruitment plan or revamp their recruitment plan to make it more strategic will have the tools to do so.
So my session is on Tuesday at 3:30. It is called Lasso Them In, the Ted Lasso Way of Building a Winning SEM Plan. And I am partnering with Interact Communication, who helped us write our SEM plan, to really talk about from start to finish how we completed this. So the pain point scans we had, the critical conversations, the shared governance in writing the plan, and then how we are actually going about implementing that. So we're really looking at it from start to finish in how we wrote our plan. And then we're using some Ted Lasso isms and video clips in there to kind of help drive home our points of what the critical conversations you need to have as you're writing that. Having the campus buy-in, having community buy-in, all, and sharing your data-informed decision-making process. All of that comes into writing our plan. So you'll get to hear about how we experience that, especially from a community college perspective. Is going to be interesting, I think.
Awesome. And so my session's also Tuesday on the 7th between 3 o'clock to 3:30 to 4:30. And we look at, it's actually a panel together with Jim Rollins, the Associate Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Management at UC San Diego. And we look at how to internationalize or globalize your current undergraduate strategic enrollment management plan, right? So we recognize that many institutions, particularly in the Northeast, but elsewhere in the country, are looking to meet the challenges of the enrollment cliff by heavily hiring staff to recruit abroad and obviously build those voids that they see in their enrollment by admitting international students. But we take a little bit of a deeper dive into actually helping folks understand that you just can't say, okay, we're going to go recruit international students without actually understanding their curriculum, right? And what are the differences in curriculum in different countries? How can you standardize the process for the sake of equity and efficacy but more importantly, how to set up your international students for success by simply not just recruiting them, but actually making sure they're then also later on able to graduate, that they're taking advantage of all the opportunities your institution afford rather than repeating a course because your office was not prepared to take on the influx of students, not knowing what their credentials are. And ACRO provides a lot of those resources, so we'll look at that as well. But really making sure that folks are a little bit more empowered to just not, I think oftentimes what happens in our higher ed enterprises, we see a problem and we tend to think, okay, the best way to fix is let's do XYZ, put a Band-Aid on it, throw lots of money on it, and boom, it'll go away. And I really hope that, in the next couple of years, as higher education is going through the shift, we realize that's just not going to work anymore. You just, it's just, you can't just throw crazy amounts of funding towards something that's broken without actually focusing on the systems and actually creating a long-term approach. I think that's what we really try to cover by when we help folks in this session understand how to globalize their undergraduate SEM plan.
Yes, actually hearing Jenny talk a little bit about working with a consultant and then also with Daniel talking a little bit some of the ACRO resources. One of the things I'll remind everybody is one of the things that's really great about the ACRO SEM conference, if you've not gone before, is it's a really great opportunity to kind of dip your toe into a number of things. So one of the things I liked about all three of your sessions was really that opportunity of, even if you're not going to do something that is specific to the way that you are or have developed your plan, it will absolutely get you to think about, what do I want to do at my institution? No, regardless of what role you are in the organization, you can think about how do you influence the strategy at your institution. And again, Lee and I are both really good examples of being able to have a plan and have some direction that you're going, even if it's not written anywhere, even if the board hasn't endorsed it, you're still heading in a direction and hopefully it works. And I think that's one of the really good things that comes out of SEM as a conference is how many great ideas you hear. So that I encourage folks to think about that. One of the other things I encourage folks to take advantage of is the different opportunities. So two things that I'll call out specifically. One is if you have 4 or more people attending the SEM conference from your institution, you can sign up for the SEM Teams experience, and you'll actually get assigned a coach who is a SEM professional, usually fairly seasoned, that will work with you on identifying problems, problem solving. At minimum, it gives you some really good direction on who to connect with at the conference, but a lot of times it also grows into starting to build a foundation for what a SEM plan might be for you. A lot of times folks use that as a jumping off point to be able to think about a consulting engagement or bringing in a contractor to work with you on some projects. And then the other one is specifically with ACRO Consulting is we have a lot of opportunities built in where schools that are thinking about engagements have an opportunity to meet with consultants while you're there and really think about it. So for the three of you, you are not just presenters, you are also attendees. So what are you most excited about, or what things are you interested in learning more about at the SEM conference, or specific sessions that you're really interested in going to?
Yeah, so I'll jump in because there was one session that really caught my eye, and this is a Tuesday session as well. And it kind of is the I don't know, the opposite of what Jenny was talking about earlier, and what I'm trying to do with a campus-wide strategy that builds buy-in in addition to, coming out with an executable plan. And the session is called, "Can you write me a SEP real quick? Strategic enrollment planning without the time or commitment to follow best practices." So I, for one, am going to be attending that one to see what the presenters have to say about that topic and their way of doing things and how well that worked or maybe didn't work for them.
Go ahead, Daniel.
So, sorry. So that I was actually looking at that session. There's a great session that's going to be happening on Tuesday as well, early in the morning, which is mapping the enrollment landscape of the near future, 5 emerging strategic priorities for admission teams, which is with Rob Alexander from University of Rochester and Jill Baughman. So I'm excited about that actually, because I think one of the things that we're finding, as Jim, you rightly, Jack pointed out that, you know, when we think about the changes COVID has brought in terms of admission staff changes, and we're having to figure out very quickly, and oftentimes the plans we have made in the beginning seem to have to be reshaped. So looking forward to that session quite a bit, and seeing and learning from it.
Jenny.
I have a few. One, as the admissions director, I feel everyone has an opinion on how we should get more students in. And to me, it's not about applications, it's about quality of applications that are going to yield. So there is a session about shifting the college culture to enrollment belongs to everyone. This is something I've been trying to implement that is part of our strategic plan, is that we are all recruiters. And are we sharing the same information? Do we know what our faculty to student ratio is? Do we know how much our foundation gives in scholarships? So that was one that was interesting to me. And then also the faculty engagement with admitted students. I think that could be that, especially at a small school, when you're going to really get to know your instructor, they may teach the majority. Our graphic design department has 1 full-time faculty member and will teach the majority of your classes with you. I always say our CAD instructor, just if you're interested at all, just go speak to him and he'll talk you into it. So I think that could be a great recruiting tool that is missing from our plan right now. So that was another one that was interesting to me.
Yeah, one I'll call out that's actually in competition with the session I'm doing. So I'm helping teach the pre-conference SEM Institute, but at the same time, the American Indian Council is actually doing a workshop that's really more of a roundtable on issues that are facing traditionally native serving students. And again, I think that's one that, as we think about some of the communities that have been hardest hit as we've gone through COVID and haven't necessarily rebounded as quickly from an education and higher education standpoint, that's one that I think we're definitely seeing challenges in. So again, that's one where even for non-traditionally native serving institutions, I think that's a really great opportunity to think about what are some of the things you can do to remove barriers and create more opportunities. And for some of us, an opportunity to look at, depending on where you are in the country, to look at new enrollment avenues as well. So, well, I want to thank all of you. Again, this has been really wonderful. Again, one of the things that we really like to do is be able to talk about some of the sessions that are coming up, but also to be able to learn from people and to really get an opportunity to hear your perspectives more. Hopefully as an opportunity for folks to connect with you while they're in Seattle. So I look forward to seeing all of you and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank you.